Hey there, Episcopal Church. Thanks for joining into this conversation about thinking about the church in some new ways. This next series of videos, we're going to be looking at three ideas which come from Adrienne Maree Brown and her book, Emergent Strategy. These ideas, I think, are helpful to help us imagine the church in some new ways. So, in the next three videos, I'm going to be talking about strategic intention, fractals, and flocking. Then we'll have a fourth video that kind of ties it all together. So let's talk about strategic intention. Adrienne Maree Brown makes the point that there is a difference between strategic planning, which a lot of organizations and churches do, and strategic intention. And I want to emphasize strategic intention as a way for us as a church to engage in the uncertain future which lies ahead of us. So, what's the difference between strategic intention and strategic planning? Well, strategic planning, which you're probably already familiar with, is a process whereby you figure out where you're going, you make goals, and you set those goals, and then you make plans to fulfill those goals moving towards where you're going. Strategic planning is a lot about action, it's a lot about clarity. We're going to do this, we're not going to do that. We're going to plan for the future that we want to inhabit. There's nothing wrong with strategic planning. In fact, it's very helpful in a lot of ways. But when you are facing an uncertain future, you can spend a lot of time, burn a lot of energy focusing on your plans in ways that ultimately are not helpful. Adrienne Maree Brown talks about strategic intention as a different way of organizing our leadership efforts. Strategic intention is this: instead of focusing on our strategic plan, let's instead spend our energy and our time being intentional about who we want to be, what we think the church is, how we want our relationships to be. And the more clear we can be about our strategic intention, then that allows us to adapt and respond to whatever happens in the future while staying true to our core strategic intention. So, let's work through this idea of the difference between strategic planning and strategic intention with a very timely and practical example. As you all know, there is a pretty important election coming up in the United States of America. We are in the presidential election cycle. And as we all know, the election is very close. There is at least the possibility that that election, no matter who gets elected, will be contested. Or there is the possibility that that election might not be clear for days or weeks or maybe even months as this process sort of unfolds. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And unlike in many past years, ordinary years, when we could assume that someone will be elected and on the next day we'll know who that is, and then we'll just know who's going to be inaugurated president, this time around, there is not super amounts of certainty about how that's all going to go down. If we were going to work on the church's strategic plan to engage with the election, we would find ourselves spinning out a variety of scenarios and saying, well, if this happens, we'll do this plan, and if this happens, we'll do this plan, and if this happens, we'll do this plan. Instead, I would like us as a church to focus on our strategic intention, spending our energy focusing on what do we think the church is, no matter what happens with respect to this election, and focusing the intention of our churches, both at the congregational level and at the diocesan level, on what are we as a church? Who are we called to be? What are our values and where do we stand? Let's be really clear about those things. And so, how would we do that? To me, what I'm inviting our congregations to do is think clearly, because you know your congregation, and in the Diocese of the Rio Grande, we're about half Republican, half Democrat. In the Diocese of the Rio Grande, in New Mexico and far west Texas, often the Episcopal Church is the only place in town where every week Republicans and Democrats get together and they not only like each other, we don't only share food together, we actually love each other and work together on projects to better our lives and to care for our neighbors in the community. So we share a lot in terms of common values. We actually love people on the other side who have the other yard sign in their yard. We actually know them and love them. So how can the Episcopal Church be strategically intentional about who we're going to be as a church at a time of strife politically? And we might go back to Jesus and say, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus in a politically uncertain time frame? Jesus said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Jesus also said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Jesus called us to be a community. He called people from a variety of walks of life to be a community. We in the Episcopal Church are now using the term beloved community to describe the nature of the community that we believe we are creating as members of the Episcopal Church. Beloved community means a place where everybody belongs and where everyone knows that they are loved, first by God, and then that love of God is also embodied in the community. We might disagree. We might not have the same opinions about anything. In fact, if you show up at a church potluck, there's going to be a bunch of people who are not united by what they think, and they're not even united necessarily about what they believe, but they're united because God loves us all. We all pray together. We're united by our prayer, and we find a unity in prayer and at the Eucharist in a way that is different from the kind of unity that's created at a political rally where we all agree the same thing, or the kind of unity that's created when we're all rooting for the same team to win the World Series. Go Dodgers. What I'm talking about is that we are in the church unified by our love for God and our love for one another. So if we are clear, if every congregation in the diocese is clear, that is the ground on who we are, then we can respond to whatever happens with respect to this election, bearing witness to the truth we know in God and the truth we want to proclaim to the world. We can then respond to whatever happens in the world around us from the place of our clear intent and our clear identity as Episcopalians who love God. And that means our energy is focused on making sure we are staying true to our clearest intention and our most strongly held values, no matter what happens around us. There is stability there. There is consistency there. And sure, it may lead to some plans. I mean, it might make sense for each Episcopal church to look at its community and think, how can our church bear witness to the love we know in God and the unity we see at the altar in our neighborhood? It might make sense to even make plans. Let's have a forum to talk about that. Let's think thoughtfully about how we could bear witness to that in the world. There's a great billboard in the Diocese of Western North Carolina that shows the church standing for unity in a time of division. So you might end up making some plans, but the focus of the energy is not on the plans. The focus of the energy is on who do we intend to be. So that's one practical example that's timely for right now, but I also think Episcopal Church, we need to start thinking about who are we as Episcopalians. And in the Diocese of the Rio Grande, that's what our Phase 1 plan has been about. We have asked each congregation to spend some time answering 4 questions. Those 4 questions are very thoughtfully and intentionally designed to elicit from the congregation your passions. What makes the Episcopal Church something that is valuable, that has changed your life? What are the parts of the Episcopal Church's ministry that matter to you most? We're going to be sharing the results of that as we move towards our diocesan convention in the second week of November. But the point behind all of that is that we might, as a diocese, develop a sense of our strategic intention, a clearer vision of who we are called to be. And based on that clear intention, we can then adapt and respond to whatever the future holds for us. In the next video, I'm going to talk about fractals, which is a scientific concept that comes from the way the universe is created, but also allows us to see ourselves and the church in a different kind of a way, and to drive culture change so that our church becomes more and more like the church we intend to be.